as the ground was settling under their houses, they're getting cracks in their foundations, and that would be a big problem. You know, your house foundation cracks, there's not much way you're going to resell it.
Abandoned coal mines, sinkholes opening up overnight in a town that lost its identity. We spent a day unearthing the history of Rock Springs.
Well, there's a sense of pride living here. You know, the wind blows a lot, it's hot in the summer, it's cold in the winter, the dust gets into everything. In terms of the coal mining history of Rock Springs, that pretty much ended in the late 1950s and early 1960s, and it's probably not coming back.
You wouldn't know it by passing through on I-80, but Rock Springs was once a pivotal hub for coal mining in the state of Wyoming. Not much was left behind after the final mine closed its doors. Historians like Dave Johnson play a big role in preserving the town's past.
The people who worked in the coal mines, most of those have passed away. Most of the people who are here now don't remember coal mining, had no connection to coal mining, except maybe it was something that their grandparents did.
What does remain mostly lies within the local city hall. Dave showed us inside.
Here is the mine entrance. We're probably somewhere right around in here right now. So these are square miles, so you can see it's going several miles from north to south.
Coal was discovered in Rock Springs in the late 1800s. By the turn of the century, Union Pacific had set up shop to fuel its ever-expanding rail network.
Most 19th century railroads need coal really badly to power their locomotives and stuff, so the Union Pacific Railroad built through Rock Springs, and that's what led to the mines being opened.
Dave isn't from Rock Springs. Originally from Minnesota, he came to Wyoming as a young archaeologist in the 80s. He found an unlikely outlet for his passion in the former coal town.
The work that I've done for DEQ involved recording historical mining sites, doing historical research on these sites, evaluating archaeological materials found within these sites, then determining their significance under the criteria found in the National Register of Historic Places. I ended up spending the next 40 years here when I expected to barely make 40 days. And see, there's another one that shows how the roofs are supporting, and once these columns, if they're not maintained after 50 years or more, they're going to rot away and they're going to be gone. There's nothing supporting the roof in their place except the roof itself, and down comes the roof.
There were 10 mines in the downtown area alone, with every tunnel that was ever dug having a potential for collapse, a problem that plagued the town in years past. Before we got into that though, Dave wanted to show us around town.
This area here, this is where the old UP number 1 mine used to be. So it would be just kind of built right back. I think these buildings are not part of it, but they'd be right in this area. So all those tunnels are going off in that direction from here. Actually, the towns grew up around the mines rather than the mines growing up around the town. So if you're here in the 1890s, the city hall and the mine tipples would be pretty much dominating what you see, and everything else is going to be wood frame buildings, wood frame houses.
Rock Springs was a blue-collar town to find. Life wasn't easy, but the promise of steady work in the mines was enough to persuade people far and wide to make the trek to Wyoming.
A lot of these people were living in houses with poor central heating, poorly insulated. You know, there's some accounts of people living in company houses where you could look outside between the gaps in the siding. So it was kind of more a feeling of shared difficulties that kind of brought these people together. Mining was hard. You never knew when a wall might fall, or you might be involved in some accident. You were united by the difficulties you were sharing, than you were divided by whether you were from China or Japan or Italy or Croatia or whatever.
Lack of demand meant the industry couldn't be sustained. By the early 1960s, the final coal mine shut down operations, stripping a core identity from the town and its people.
It just devastated the town, because that's all it had been for like 90 years or so, from 1869 to like 1950 or 1962 or so. So it just pretty much just tore the guts out of the town.
Our next stop was a tipple, a key piece of infrastructure for loading coal for further transport once it left a mine. Dave often gives tours of the site to visitors.
Yeah, I mean, every mine would have had some variation of this. It would be pretty much dominating the skyline of any coal mining town. This building was built in 1936. When this thing was in operation, the motors would be running, the shaker screens would be shaking and banging, dust would be coming up from the shaker tables. I mean, the thing would have been hot in the summer and cold in the winter, and full of coal dust all the time. So it would have been a rough place to work. Wondering what it would have been like if I could have seen what these people were doing 40 or 50 years in the past. I never did this work myself, but if you had like a time machine that you could look back and see what these people were doing, it would make my job a whole lot easier, because I wouldn't have to try and figure it out from a scatter of artifacts and a bunch of newspaper articles to actually see what's happening.
Dave might not have been around to see the mines in operation, but he was present for the after effects of nearly a century of underground mining that took place right below the main streets.
This is where the big mine subsidence hole opened up. So it was a good 50, 60 feet long.
He's talking about subsidence, what happens when an abandoned mine shaft caves in, leaving everything above it in a rather precarious situation.
Probably about 20, 25 feet wide and up to 20 feet deep or more. Pretty much straight down too. It didn't slope, it just went straight down to where the old tunnel would have been.
Subsidence plagued Rock Springs ever since the beginning. The buildings affected range from City Hall to houses in the neighborhood.
When the subsidence hole opened right here in the street, a lot of the sand that was built around the foundation slumped away, and that allowed the building to start shifting. We were getting interior cracks in the walls and the plaster walls inside, but we also started to see some cracks on the outside. And what that kind of tended to suggest was that the tower was maybe trying to separate from the west and north walls of the building. The thing about coal mines is that they are usually excavated into relatively soft rock. You needed some type of a serious framework just to keep the tunnels from collapsing because the rock was so soft. In a lot of cases, they would use wooden poles. As the area of the mining was played out, they're moving on to different areas, they would not keep replacing the wooden posts, they'd just be left to decompose, so there's no longer anything supporting the roof. So that was where subsidence comes in, is that the roof is no longer being supported by either wooden posts or coal pillars. Depending on the rock that the roof consists of, this stuff can eventually collapse.
While most of the sinkholes have been repaired today, as recently as October of 2024, work was underway on I-80, which was built directly adjacent to old mine entrances. That project has since been completed. Although the mines in Rock Springs will never produce coal again, the legacy is hard to forget. With each new generation being farther and farther removed from the town's past, it's people like Dave who will continue to remind everyone of what once was and what continues to be.
Times change. Rock Springs is not the town it was 50 years ago. It's not the town it was 100 years ago or 150 years ago. Life goes on, things change, and people adapt to that change.